Kinyobi. There you go. Kinyobi.
Mizu, water.
Mizu, water. Ichigatsu, which is January. Yeah.
Hitoride.
Hi. Hitoride is alone. Right.
Suyobi. No, Kayobi.
Kayobi, yeah, that's the fire one, not water. Kayobi is Tuesday. Shita is below or under. Right. Sanjihan, 3:30.
Mokuyobi.
Mokuyobi is Thursday. Right. Suyobi, which is Wednesday. Wednesday, water day. Suyobi.
Nichiyobi.
Nichiyobi. Sunday.
Doyobi, Saturday.
Sunday. Right.
Naka.
Middle, yes.
Ue.
Above or on.
Nihonjin.
Nihonjin. Right. Hon is book.
Getsuyobi.
Yeah, Getsuyobi. Monday. Nihon, Japan. Right.
Matsu. Is the verb.
Yes, it's a verb.
Matsumachimasu.
Hai, matsumachimasu, and it means to wait. Right. Right. In front. Yes, yuru imasu, and it means
A person is at a place.
right, to be in a place, stay at a place, and it's for animate only, right? Gomennasai is? I'm sorry.
Yorin, hospital.
Hi, Yorin, hospital,
Machi, town.
town. Hi. Let's do this one.
No. Yesterday.
Hi.
Ichiji kan, so for 1 hour.
1 hour. Hi.
At the time of.
Hi.
Square.
Desk. Hi.
Neck.
Cat. Hi.
Egg.
Hi.
Colon. Park.
Hi.
Bottle.
Hi.
Migi.
Hi. Right.
So it doesn't mean right hand, just like your right.
It's the
Just
right,
right.
as in the right side of whatever.
Okay.
Migi, hidari. Just right and left. Yeah. Right as in right side, not writing something down and not correct.
Okay.
That's important because, yeah.
English confused.
Yeah. English has its share of homophones.
Arubaito.
Hi.
Part-time job.
Yes, part-time job. Hi.
Class. Where we at?
Hi, class. Hi.
Isu.
Yep. Chair. Hi.
Omiyage. Souvenir.
Hi.
Gohan.
Rice or meal, yes. Cooked rice. There's actually a separate word for uncooked rice.
This is the one that means it's either next or nearby, and it goes next.
Near.
Near.
Yeah. Chikaku is near.
Tonai.
Chikaku.
Some.
A lot, yes.
Doshite.
Why? Exactly.
From.
Yes, from.
Arimasu.
Aru arimas is
There
is or to have to exist for
And.
inanimate objects. Important distinction.
Kakimasu.
Kaku kakimas. Which verb is that?
Right.
To write. Okay.
Hidari.
Hidari is left. Yeah.
Ushiro. Behind.
Behind, yes. Back or Kaimono is
Shopping.
shopping, yes. The pronoun you, yes. Which doesn't get used a whole lot, but there it is. Inu is a
One.
dog. 1-1. Yeah, that's the onomatopoeia for barking in Japanese. 1-1. Yeah.
Kodomo.
Child. Right.
Shashin. Picture or photograph. Hotel.
Hoteru. Right.
Restaurant.
Restaurant.
Jikan. Meaning hour.
Yeah,
Hours.
hours. How many hours?
Last week.
Last
I know he lives in Chu.
Okay.
How I must.
Oh, I must to meet, yes.
Tegami.
Tegami is a
A letter.
letter, yes. You know, a written letter on paper as
That's right.
opposed to made.
Made. On.
Bread, right.
Otera. Temple. Buddhist temple.
Yes, Buddhist temple. Right.
Sudapata.
Right.
Basate.
Basate is basta. Right.
Kaokaimasu.
Kaimas to buy, yes. Just remember kaimas, kaimono. Kaimas is to buy, kaimono is buying things, shopping. The noun form.
Torimasu.
Right, torimasu means
Means to take, as in a picture.
yes.
Wakaru, wakarimasu.
To understand.
Right,
Burai, so about,
about,
approximate measurement.
yeah, for length of time as opposed to clock time.
Dakara, so therefore.
Therefore, yes. Oops.
Together
And
with.
or with, yeah.
Tonari. Next to.
Yes, this one is next to tonari. So like tonari no hito would be the person next to you.
Oh. Aida, so between. Made. So it means to.
Yes.
So, kara.
To, yeah, karamade, from, to, or until. Once more.
Hitori.
Doride was alone, yeah.
Oh, under.
Under, yep, just like what it looks like.
Where, on.
On or above,
Naka inside.
yep. Okay. Kinori is Friday,
Okyobi.
Thursday,
Suyobi.
Wednesday,
Kayobi.
Tuesday, yep,
Getsuyobi.
Monday,
Honya.
store,
To.
person, okay. That is nice and randomized for the next one. Okay. Now that we've reviewed those, let's put them into practice. 115ページを見ましょう。115ページ。Okay, so this first exercise is easier than it looks because all we're doing is saying what exists in the picture with a simple sentence like blank ga arimasu or blank ga imasu. So all you're doing with this exercise really is choosing between arimasu and imasu based on whether it's an animate or inanimate object that you're identifying. So all you have to do is make a sentence. So, you know, there is a cat, or there is a supermarket, there is a restaurant, or there is a doctor, there is a bicycle, or there is a person, you know. We've got a cat, a dog, 3 different people, and then all these different locations. So you just have to do noun, ga, and then either arimasu or imasu, depending on which one's appropriate for that noun that you picked.
Is arimasu animate?
No, arimasu is inanimate, imasu is for the people and animals. Okay? So, Sierra-san, dozo. Just one sentence, and then we're just gonna go around the room and let everybody pick one.
Is it with ga?
Yes,
Is
with
it?
ga.
Okay. Hon ga arimasu.
Okay, hon ga arimasu. Yes, he's holding a book. Hi, Andrea-san?
Ginko ga imasu.
Ginko ga
Arimasu.
arimasu. There you go. Okay. Yuki-san?
Kisaten ga imasu.
Kissaten ga
Arimasu.
arimasu. There you go.
Arimasu is inanimate?
Arimasu is inanimate, yes.
Kitencha ga arimasu.
Hi,
Neko ga imasu.
hi, neko ga imasu. And one more.
Toshokan ga arimasu.
Hi, tosokan ga arimasu. And obviously, there's lots more sentences you can make about these. So for the homework, I would encourage you to make as many as you can for the practice. But in class, I want us to actually move on to the next one because the afternoon class already did this part. They took less time on the vocab last time. So, Shira-san, so part B is not about the picture, okay? It's a completely separate exercise. So when it says, the question that it says, go ahead and read the question first for us.
あなたの町に日本のレストランがありますか?
Okay, so first let's decipher this question. So, あなたの町に日本のレストランがありますか? What's it actually asking? What's あなたの町, first of all? Your town, yes. So, あなたの町に would be
In your town.
in your town, yes. 日本のレストランがありますか?
Sushi or
Is there a Japanese restaurant in your town? That's what it's asking. Does that make sense now that we deciphered it? Okay, so we're gonna let Andrea-san answer.
はい、あります。
Hai arimasu. So that's a good example of the short answer for this kind of a question. Hai arimasu. If the answer was no, you could say, Ie arimasen, right? What if you wanted to do a longer answer? What would be some options for a longer answer to that same question?
parrot back what it, parts of the
Yeah,
question.
just parrot back parts of the question. So, hai, watashi no machi ni nihon no restaurant ga arimasu. Notice that you change out the pronoun, right?
Sure.
So, watashi no machi ni nihon no restaurant ga arimasu would be one possible long answer. A medium length answer could be something like, hai, nihon no restaurant ga arimasu.
That exists.
Yes, there is a Japanese restaurant. Make sense? So, for our purposes, hai arimasu is a perfectly good answer. There's nothing wrong with it at all. Some people, though, find it confusing to be allowed to leave out all that other stuff. So, I just wanted to point out that any of those three variations are perfectly good. Okay? じゃあ、Andrea-san, 2番読んでください。
あなたの家に猫がいますか?
Avery's going to answer. First, can we figure out what's it asking? あなたの家に猫がいますか?
Do I have a cat?
Yeah, is there a cat in your house is, more specifically, but we can assume that if it's living in your house, it's because it's yours, right?
Hai imasu.
はい、います。はい。But it is just an interesting distinction to think about the fact that in English we ask, do you have a cat? In Japanese, they're saying, in your home, does a cat exist? So technically, if you live with a roommate and the cat actually belongs to your roommate and not you, technically the answer is still hai imasu because it's in your house, but it's not really yours, right? So technically that is a possibility with the Japanese, whereas in English you would have a little bit of a different thing to say with that situation, right? So that's just, it points up the difference in the idiom. じゃあ3番どうぞ。
あなたの学校に何がありますか?
So what's this asking?
It's a very philosophical question.
Yeah, or at least a very open-ended one.
I'm confused, is it asking if you,
Yeah,
not even go to
at
school,
first when I
you
read
have
this, I
school?
thought it meant, like what's the name of the school? Like,
No.
is there a school that you go to? But no, it's like
No.
asking, what is there at the school?
Yeah, what is
Your
in your school?
Oh,
So,
what's in your
a
school?
あなたの学校に is in your school, right?
Right.
And then 何がありますか? What exists?
So,
So, はい、鉛筆があります is a perfectly legit answer to that crazy question. That is a crazy broad question, right? I mean, you could answer with anything from 椅子があります to 机があります to 学生がいます 先生がいます right? To 図書館があります right? 喫茶店があります right?
Sure.
本屋があります There are a zillion possible answers for that crazy question, right?
Yeah.
So, but it also highlights the difference between the yes-no questions, like 1 and 2, and the question word questions, which, number 3 is an example of. So notice that whenever you've got a nani, or an itsu, or a nanji, or anything like that that's a question word in your question, the answer cannot just parrot back what
It's
the
not a
question
yes or no
had,
question.
because it's not a yes or no question. You can still parrot back some parts of the question, but wherever that question word is in the format, that has to be replaced with something that actually answers that particular question word. So nani is asking what, so you need to answer with some sort of a noun in that spot. And if you wanted to use your to and, you could use something like, 学生と先生がいます. And then if you wanted to get more detailed, you could add a second sentence, 机と鉛筆と本屋と喫茶店もあります or something like that. You also have all these things. Okay? So, ジュナンさん
yes.
どうぞ。
あなたの学校に日本人の学生がいますか?
Those ones asking if there are Japanese students in my school.
Right. And depending on which school you want to answer about, this one or the other one, I know the answer for this school is yes, there are some international students from Japan here. Whether your home school has one or not, I have no idea.
I don't know, why don't we just say, hi, imasu.
Hi, imasu. Yeah, that's true for at least one of the schools you attend, so that works. じゃあ、どうぞ。タテヤナさん。
で、デパートに何かありますか?
Right. So what's that one asking? Anybody?
At the department store, what is there?
Yes. So it's another one of those same broad questions like number 3 was, only instead of about your school, it's about a department store. So just sort of in general, what's in a department store? どうぞ。
T シャツあります。
Okay, T シャツがあります。はい, that's perfectly good answer. So once again, there are about a zillion different possible answers to that, right? どうぞ。6番お願いします。
この教室に
asking, first of all, この教室に誰がいますか?
Who's in the classroom?
Yeah, who is in this classroom? The この makes it specifically this classroom right now, so.
How do you answer it again?
So, この教室に in this classroom, 誰がいますか? 誰 is asking who. So you have to replace the 誰 with one or more people's names or some other noun that describes the kind of people, like 学生 or sensei,
Okay.
and then just がいます.
Okay, so I can say この教室に先生が
Yeah,
いますか?
がいます.
がいます.
Yeah, 先生がいます works. 学生がいます would also work. Or you could start naming names. You know, Dylan さんと Andrea さんがいます. You know, something like that. You know, so again, multiple possible answers there. Okay, じゃあ次読んでください。7番。
So,
Yeah, I know the small print can be hard to read. 動物園。
動物園に何がいますか?
はい。
いますか?
はい。動物園に何がいますか?
お土産があります.
Okay, that's very true, especially in Florida, right? お土産があります. Because of the imas being in the question, that sort of implies that they want to know what living beings are there. So you could say something like, Tora ga imasu, okay, that would be tiger. Not in Brevard Zoo, but in some zoos. Yeah.
Wait, what did she say?
She said, omiyage ga arimasu,
Say what is-
souvenirs.
Oh.
Yeah, that works, yeah. There's a gift shop in every zoo I've ever visited. Right? So that's definitely one option, but when the imas is in the question, that sort of implies that they're going for the animate answer, so you could say zookeeper ga imasu if you want to get really creative, you know, or you could think up, you know, what animal do we know how to say? Lion ga imasu, or let me think, zebra ga imasu, kirin ga imasu. Kirin is giraffe. Anybody heard of kirin biru? Kirin beer?
Is that what they named it after?
No, well, kirin originally was a sort of mythical Japanese creature, actually a mythical Chinese creature that is sometimes compared to a unicorn in the West just for its mythical nature more so than anything else, because it doesn't look anything like a Western unicorn. But it apparently did have a horn. And somehow or other somebody decided that the closest real-life animal to the kirin might be the giraffe, and that, you know, somebody perhaps thought that maybe somebody saw a giraffe, tried to describe it, and over the centuries the description got so distorted that it turned into what a kirin is usually pictured as, which doesn't look anything like a giraffe.
I heard that what
But-
our
yeah.
perception of a unicorn was actually a one-horned rhino.
Very possible,
Sure. Or a narwhal.
And they used-
yeah,
Well, they said there were unicorn and then there were binding horns is what
yeah.
so it was like.
So,
But
who
ours-
knows? But at any rate, so kirin is the modern Japanese word for giraffe. Yeah, even though it doesn't look anything like the mythical kirin. But if you ever get a chance to look at the logo on kirin biru, that's what the mythical kirin supposedly looked like. And it looks like some sort of crazy cross between a Chinese dragon and something with not such a long body. Yeah, so, at any rate, so but since I think number 7 is just an odd choice because we don't even know the word dobutsuen, and we don't know the words for
Say,
animals that would normally be in one, other than, I mean, they taught us neko and inu, but
doesn't
how,
really
how many
apply to
times
them.
do you find house cats or pet dogs in
Service
zoos?
animal, yeah.
Yeah,
that'd
service.
be-
Yeah,
that'd be the
And
only-
lions are technically cats,
right, but they don't
Neko.
usually
Wildcats.
call them neko.
but yeah.
Yeah, so,
that'd be fine.
so, at any rate, so Hachiban, let's ask the next question.
あなたの国に何がありますか？
Right. So,
So basically, what's
Another
another country?
yes, so another one of these crazy broad questions, right?
Kenya.
So, what does your country have? You know, so, and remember, we're talking about,
Easier.
you know, in Japan, this textbook would have been originally used for multinational classrooms where, you know, there might have been 3 Americans in the room, a couple Canadians, a few Germans, a few Africans, a few, you know, people from different parts of Asia other than Japan, you know. So,
I answered this question in terms of what was not, and I said that Florida ni, oh wait, I had to look up the word for cold, so I said, samusa ga arimasen, so I answered what terms of what's not in
okay,
Florida.
but anata no kuni ni nani ga arimasu ka? So, name one thing that we actually know how to say in Japanese. It doesn't have to be a geographic feature, although that's kind of the first thing that usually comes to mind for most people.
The first thing I thought of was Fort McDonald's.
Okay,
Sounds like Makudo.
yeah, makudo ga arimasu, that works.
I'm just gonna say. White House got.
Arimasu.
Arimasu.
Okay, White House ga arimasu. They actually do that in katakana for the White House in DC, as opposed to a white home. You know, if you're talking about, you know, shiroi uchi or shiroi ie, that would be just somebody's house that is painted white. But White House is the word for the actual residence of the President of the US. Okay, どうぞ。9番読んでください。
Ananda no ie ni nani ga arimasu.
か。何がありますか? You left out the か。
写真があります。
はい, that works. 写真があります. Yep. You have photos in your house. Okay. Any questions about how that works? So later we'll actually go back to looking at pictures and saying not just what exists, but actually where it's located. We've got that coming up later. But for now, we're actually going to look at taking the arimasu structure and applying it to asking and answering questions about more abstract things like school subjects. So, you know, do you have a French class on a particular day? Do you have a test on a particular day? Because arimasu gets used for that too. It's not just physical things that you can hold that arimasu can apply to. It also applies to events that might be happening in your life. Okay, so whose turn is it to read the question? どうぞ。
Example.
はい。
月曜日にフランス語のクラスがありますか?
はい、あります。
はい、あります。Okay, 月曜日にフランス語のクラスがありますね。Okay, so using that same kind of structure and pattern and that same chart, we're going to ask and answer more questions about this imaginary person's schedule.
Takeshi's schedule.
Takeshi's schedule. Okay, so 立山さん、1番どうぞ。
曜日に、
はい。
OK 月曜日に英語のクラスがありますか？
So first you have to know which day of the week is 月曜日。月曜日に英語のクラスがありますか？ So 月曜日 means, who remembers? Monday, yes. Okay. So 月曜日に英語のクラスがありますか？ What's 英語? English language, right? So 英語のクラスがありますか? On the Monday. Look at this.
Oh, it's me?
Yeah, it's your,
I thought it was.
no, she, oh,
We stepped out.
Jack
Oh.
went to the restroom or
Okay.
something, so. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize you didn't know it was you.
Yeah.
That's why we were all like staring at you and, yeah. You didn't see him leave, I did, so.
That's okay. Okay. はい、あります。
はい、あります。Okay. じゃあ2番どうぞ。
Okay. 火曜日にコンピューターの
クラス。
クラスがありますか？
はい。火曜日にコンピューターのクラスがありますか？
はい。
コンピューター。火曜日。Look at it again. 火曜日 means which day?
Tuesday?
はい。And which one is コンピュータ
Wednesday.
Right. So what would be the answer here? いえ、ありません。
ありません。
はい。Because we're talking about the class, not the people in the class at this point, okay? クラス means like the course, not necessarily the people taking the course. You see what I'm saying? どうぞ。
木曜日にフランス語のクラスがありますか？
So the question was 木曜日にフランス語のクラスがありますか？
Is French,
フランス語 is French, right?
so
And it's asking about 木曜日, which is which day?
Thursday.
Thursday, right.
So, yeah,
Finish the sentence.
yeah. ありません。
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 いえ、ありません。No, he does not have French class on Thursday, right? じゃあ、okay, go ahead and ask Jack the next question, so he can make up for the turn he missed.
土曜日にクラスがありますか？
Schedule, 116ページですね。
Okay, right there.
Yeah. Class, I'm sorry,
You're good. クラス、
がありません。
はい、いいですね。いいえ、クラスがありません。Correct answer. Okay, じゃあ次の質問を読んでください。You're gonna ask Dylan. 5番ですね。 it's your
Oh,
turn to
oh,
read the
oh,
question,
I'm sorry.
yeah, go on.
Okay. 水曜日に何がありますか？
水曜日に何がありますか？
フランス語のクラスと英語のクラスとコンピュータのクラスとがあります。
Okay, leave off the final toe. Just put the toes in between.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
はい。Okay, so フランス語と英語とコンピュータのクラス is another way you could do that.
Okay, that's better.
があります。はい。フランス語と英語とコンピュータのクラスがあります。じゃあ6番、タピアナさんに聞いてください。
金曜日に何がありますか？
For English test, where I said 英語のテスト。
はい、that works.
英語のテストあります。
Okay, 英語のテスト。
があります。
はい。And there's one other thing he's got going on that day.
Oh. Okay. 英語のテストとパーティーがあります。
はい、そうですね。So after school, he gets to go party.
After his test, his
Yeah, he
evaluation
gets,
starts.
yeah, right. Take that hard English test and then go party afterwards. Okay, じゃあ、タティアナさん、we're gonna have you ask 7番 and let Jack go again because he missed a turn before, so.
日曜日に何がありますか？
日曜日に no class or
Okay, but what does he actually have?
I'm using English. It's
Yeah,
Oh,
so,
he has something.
no, look at the, he's got no school, but he's got something else in the afternoon.
it's a part-time job.
Ah, who remembers that vocabulary word?
アルバイト。
アルバイト。
アルバイトがあります。
はい、アルバイトがあります。Okay, any questions?
Could you also say クラスがありません?
Yes, yes, you
No
could
class.
also say クラスがありません。Yeah. Okay,
The club activity, is
Hi.
that soccer?
サークル, サークル is from circle,
Oh.
yeah, as in like circle of friends who meet to do something fun. So yeah, because kurabu has been taken over by the club scene, that kind of club, you know, kurabu means like a place to go dancing and drinking and, yeah, that. Yeah, with possibly some karaoke in the mix somewhere.
Okay.
And then, yeah, so sakuru is a more common term in modern Japanese for club.
Okay.
Yeah, so, yeah, I think the clubs way back when were not necessarily called sakuru. They actually are calling them boot for the most part, which is a kanji.
I wonder what language the word comes from.
Which one?
Sakura.
Sakura?
What is that?
Circle,
Oh.
English
Okay.
circle.
yeah,
Okay.
sakuru.
Social circle.
Yeah, like social circle, yeah, sakuru. Yeah, I know, it's
Or
a
sewing
strange,
circle.
Yeah, because I was like, it doesn't look like soccer, but I don't.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
thought.
like-
Sakka
Yeah.
is soccer,
Soccer.
yeah, so, yeah, it's a little confusing there. Okay, okay, so instead of actually writing out your whole schedule and your partner's schedule for Part D, for in class, let's just take turns asking about any one day of the week that you want to ask about, and the other person, let the other person tell you what their activity is going to be for that day of the week. Okay, so we're going to let Jack start by asking the example question.
月曜日に月曜日。
はい。
月曜日に何がありますか？
And see, I can just use the example answer if you want.
日本語のクラスがあります。
はい、 So obviously our schedule doesn't really fit their example, but close enough. You get the idea, right? So Shiada-san, you get to ask, pick a day of the week that you want to ask about and ask Andrea what she does on that day.
Okay. 火曜日に何がありますか？こうがあります。
Hi, that works. Right? Now you get to ask Avery a question like that. Any day that you want to pick.
木曜日に何がありますか？
喫茶店にいます。Right.
Okay, you could say you're in
Don't
the
say.
cafe, but you could also say arubaito ga arimasu.
Part-time job.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
Alright,
arubaito ga arimasu. I'm
Okay.
assuming it's part-time.
No.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
Same
Okay.
I don't know how to say full-time.
Yeah, so shigoto ga arimasu. You have work.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so you could say shigoto ga arimasu, or, yeah, because kissaten ni imasu is a true statement, but it doesn't exactly answer the question the way it's being worded.
Yeah, I was just trying to say go too.
Yeah,
But that's-
well,
it's worded-
kissaten ni ikimasu would be, I
Ikimasu.
go to the
Yeah, that's the one I was looking
kissaten.
for. Would that make
Okay.
sense in that context, or? That's still big.
Sort of. Yeah, for now, we're trying to practice,
The verbs.
with the same
Yeah.
verb that was used in the question, but I get where you're trying to go,
Okay.
so. Yeah, your turn to ask, Dylan.
Mokuyobi ni nani ga arimasu ka?
日本語のクラスがあります。
はい、そうですね。
そして日曜日に何がありますか？
仕事があります。
はい、okay. It's a
Wait,
full-time job or part-time?
I mean, アルバイトがあります。
There you go. はい、アルバイトがあります。Okay, go ahead and ask Jack.
水曜日に何がありますか？
図書館がいます。
You have a library?
But you can't use ikimasu.
Well, if that's what you want to say, I mean, it's not exactly what they were trying to get out of you, but if you don't have an event that's going on in the library, you just go to the library. You could say toshokan ni ikimasu.
図書館に行きます。
Yeah. Okay, that works. Yeah. Okay, and let's have you ask one free-form question to Sierra so she can answer something that's not dictated by the book. Yeah, so one of these, same pattern, just pick a day.
See. 金曜日に何がありますか？
サークルがあります。
はい、いいですね。サークルがあります。You have your club that day. Excellent. 質問がありますか？ there's another use of arimasu. Shitsumon is questions. Shitsumon ga arimasu ka? Do you have questions?
So like when we're asking these questions, we're asking what do they have on that day?
Yeah, what do you have, as in, what do you have scheduled? That kind of a question?
Yeah, because I think it's later on in the chapter, they also ask, like, nani o shimasu ka? Like, what
Yeah.
are you doing on this day?
Right.
It's kind of the same, asking the same
Very
thing.
similar, but,
It's like,
yeah, they're just trying to show you the various ways that animas can get used so that you understand. You can say hon ga arimasu, there is a book, but you can also say nihongo no kurasu ga arimasu, I have a Japanese language class. So there are all these different ways that arimasu and imasu get used. Okay, and you'll note that because events are never going to be people, events always take arimasu, right? There's no such thing as an event that's an animate living being, right? You can have a friend, but you can't have an event that's a person, right? So tomodachi ga imasu, I have a friend, right? But if you're talking about an event, it's always going to be arimasu. Right? You can have a dog, you can have a friend, but if you've got an event, it's going to take arimasu, not imasu. So that's an important distinction too, to just start getting used to this divide that Japanese has between arimasu and imasu, since it's something that English doesn't really do. Okay? じゃあ、パート2見ましょう。図書館はどこですか? So here we're starting to get into noting the location of things by how they relate to the location of something else that's already known. So let's let Sierra read the example sentences here.
this one's confusing.
図書館大学の
Okay.
図書館は
Hi.
I was reading the bottom row 図書館は大学の後ろです
Hi. And the other one?
図書館はスーパーの隣です
Hi. Okay, so does everybody see what we're talking about here? Toshokan. You see where Toshokan is? You see where Daigaku and Supa are? So you can see the structure of how Ushiro fits into a sentence to describe that the Toshokan is behind the Daigaku, right? So Toshokan wa Daigaku no ushiro desu. Does that make sense? And then Toshokan wa Supa no tonari desu. That's another alternate way to describe where the Toshokan is, right? So just like if you were asking somebody how to find the Dunkin' Donuts or something, depending on what else they know in this town, you might tell them, for example, it's next to the McDonald's or some such, right? Or maybe that's Krispy Kreme, I don't know, but you get my point, right? So it could be next to the such and such, or in front of the such and such, or behind the such and such.
Did you say to the right or the left of those two?
Yes, yeah, so, and that partially depends on your perspective. So from this perspective, if you're one of the people in this little picture, you see the little stick figures standing on the road there?
They're way too big.
Yeah, yeah, they're taller than the buildings. They're Godzilla people.
And it's ridiculous too.
So at any rate, so our Godzilla people, if you're talking about it from their perspective, you could say, Toshokan wa Supa no hirari desu, right? Because it's to the left of the supermarket from their perspective.
Question I had was whether you could use that on their own, like, but how would you want, if you want to say it's just on the right, like, you could you, because what I wrote down was, Yubin kyoku wa hirari desu, just, it is, it's on,
No, it's on the left. From their perspective, yeah,
Yeah.
you can do that,
Even though,
but you could also say, ryōin no mae desu, because it's across from
Yeah. it's in
the
front.
byoin, so that counts as in front of in Japanese. Okay, so let's go ahead and, oh, we're running out of time. Do you guys feel like you understand how to do these? Okay, so, practice those, write them out for next time, and we'll be able to read through them quickly. And keep going, we'll do the locations of things in the room next time, and hopefully get into the other map and, the next grammar point as well, maybe even the fourth one. So we'll see how far we get. So, okay. Let's see, we need to try and, just do this now. Okay, so we got as far as here, and then first class is really starting with that. Okay, almost it. Yeah, what's funny is that the club that I was most involved in doesn't seem to have had a group picture taken in either of these yearbooks.
Was it consecutive years?
Yeah, they're consecutive years. And for some reason, there's also a Shiba Inu in here. I'm not sure why.
Is what?
A Shiba Inu?
Oh, yeah, very popular nowadays.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could show me how to do that day kanji.
Oh,
Like,
sure.
sounds a little
Yeah,
confusing.
which remind me on Tuesday, and we'll actually go over that as a class, because it's a good one to review. So you start with the Nichi part,
Yeah,
and then you do katakana yo twice. That's the next thing.
okay.
And then you do that short-tailed bird reticle. Like that.
Okay, because I was a little confused about the sun one, because it was like in the top half. I was like,
Okay,
why
yeah,
would it
some,
be there? I'm like,
yeah, it depends on the font style,
Okay.
but most people, I think, center it a little bit more,
okay,
so,
that makes a lot more sense.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.